In March, the Labour Party supported a similar motion to this one, and in the continued absence of the long-promised windfall tax on energy companies, or indeed any fundamental attempt by this government to tackle escalating home energy bills in a real way, we're still inclined to support it and the sentiments contained therein. Wholesale prices for gas and oil are falling while energy bills at home keep on rising, and that is absolutely perverse. The energy companies can blame the mechanics of the market all they want, but it's clear that they are a hell of a lot slower to pass on cuts in their costs to Irish householders than they were to hike those prices up and rake in the record profits that have resulted. As this motion lays out, the average cost of gas and electricity bills has doubled over the last year for the domestic customer, and our citizens are now paying the highest price for electricity anywhere in Europe, according to the European Household Energy Price Index. Now, while the bills have doubled in size, the number of people in this country in fuel poverty has also doubled over the same period, and this government is simply failing to join the dots, notwithstanding the remarks made by the Minister earlier on in reprising all of the different measures that were introduced by the government over the last 18 months or so. Older people on limited incomes, people relying on social welfare to top up their income, staring in horror at the electricity and gas bills falling through the letterbox. They have no idea how to pay them, Minister. It's clear that the industry is obviously incapable of regulating itself and of acting fairly towards its customers, and so the government must intervene. And I'll say that because there is very little confidence in this country, Minister, in the regulator. And it also seems to me that the regulator, in this regard the CRU, acts like a nodding dog, supporting the interests, generally speaking, and in most cases, of the industry itself. And it pains me to say that, as somebody who believes in markets, but regulated markets, and believes in strong state regulation of markets. I think all of the evidence shows in recent years that they are certainly not all the time on the side of the consumer, and ought to be more consumer focused. The motion calls on the government to provide, and I quote, financial relief and certainty to households by reducing electricity prices to the level they are at before Putin began to wage his illegal war in Ukraine. The energy profits, as practically every speaker this evening has said, have made extraordinary profits since that time, and they can easily afford this simple measure until the market returns to some kind of what I might describe as sanity. It's clear that they are going to be slow to return their prices to sensible levels without clear intervention from the state. Now, Electric Ireland, for example, seems to think that businesses are more deserving of an energy cut than struggling householders. And my own party has called for those same favourable business terms to be passed on to the domestic customer. Earlier this year, a St Vincent de Paul report entitled Warm, Safe, Connected indicated that there are now around 377,000 people who are living in homes where they were unable to adequately heat their homes last year. And that compares, Minister, with 166,000 in 2021. And this is in what is observably a rich country. Now, the St Vincent de Paul notes that domestic energy costs have been pushed to, I quote, unprecedented heights over the past 2 years. The CPI for December 2022 revealed annual increases of 86.5% for gas and 62.7% for electricity bills. And the figures in the St Vincent de Paul report are truly shocking. And they tally with my experience of representing my constituents in Louth and East Meath. Rising energy bills have doubled the number of homes in energy poverty, as I've said, and at a time when energy prices are falling. And this is the perverse thing. And that's why this is completely intolerable. It's frankly immoral, it's unethical, and it simply cannot be stood over. Now, we have a real crisis on our hands here, and we can't afford to stand by and let the market sort it out, as is our tendency in this country. As my party leader, Deputy Manabacic, asked, is appealing to energy companies to cut their prices really the best the government can do? I've been raising ad nauseum over the last few months issues in relation to price gouging at the supermarket till. and the hyper profits being recorded by supermarkets. It's the same with electricity companies. What is it about this country that we can't seem to fairly regulate markets and ensure that our regulators are consumer focused in the way that they ought to be? And what is it about the government that simply ministers feel all they can do is commentate on a situation that's really putting householders across this country to the pins of their respective collars? Now, the second demand this motion makes is for the introduction of an energy windfall tax without further delay. I've spoken in this House on many occasions about this, about the requirement to do this quickly, and I simply just cannot understand the delay in developing the legislation, bringing the legislation to this House and imposing the kind of regime that we ought to impose on the hyper profits of energy companies and the solidarity tax on fossil fuel companies. We know the case. You've outlined the case yourself, Minister. You understand why this needs to happen. And I simply cannot understand why we are lagging behind other European Union colleagues. The Labour Party is also happy to support references in the motion to increasing the powers of the CRU, to look at, for example, the fairness of things like standing charges and giving them a function in relation to the standing charges regime, the hedging practices of energy companies, and indeed a wider function in relation to investigating the market where, for example, suspicions of price gouging are in evidence. Now, our one difficulty with the motion is the call for the reversal of the latest increases in the carbon tax. Now, we believe in the concept of polluter pays, and we're therefore broadly in favour of the principle and application of carbon taxes. In the extraordinary circumstances facing households watching these joint energy bills dropping through the letterbox, we would prefer a slightly different approach, though. And I do accept that a reduction in carbon tax is presented, I should say, by Sinn Féin as a means to assist householders who are in difficulty at the moment. I accept and I understand that, but I do know as well that over the recent past, Sinn Féin have had an issue more generally with carbon tax, and I would, we support, as I said, the Labour Party, we support the principle of carbon tax, but we have a difference of opinion in relation to how it might be applied and so on. And we have to accept and understand that the planet is burning and we have limited time to save our planet. It's a fundamental existential question, and carbon taxes and the fair application of carbon taxes is important, because we do have to have a system whereby there are taxes introduced on fossil fuels once they are applied correctly, and that's the key thing, correctly and fairly, because carbon taxes and a fiscal regime in relation to fossil fuels is critically important in terms of arming us with the weapons we need to address the climate crisis. So, in accepting that the Sinn Féin approach is fundamentally, at this point in time, to do with assisting householders, we would say that a different approach could be taken, and a fairer approach. We said, for example, earlier on this year that this state should consider temporarily nationalising the Corrib gas field and capping the price of wholesale gas. We said, and it would be instead of reversing, for example, carbon taxes, and we said as well we would introduce a €400 refundable carbon credit for households, which would by definition be targeted at working people. We do, though, accept and support the broad thrust of this motion. It's something that we are happy to support. We will work with you as well, Minister, on fine-tuning the windfall tax legislation once it is produced. I can't, as I say, for the life of me understand what the delay is. Other colleagues have listed many of the European Union states that have implemented the windfall tax in all its different forms and solidarity taxes on fossil fuel companies late last year, pretty much as soon as the European Council decision enabled them to do so. And I really can't understand what the delay is. We will work with you on that, and that needs to be done absolutely urgently. The energy companies, in our view, simply have had it all their own way for far too long, and it should not be up to the customer to almost exclusively bear the cost of this crisis situation that we're in at the moment. This has to change now, and we are happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Nash.